Welcome to another deep dive. This time into a concept that's probably caused a few headaches over the centuries. Loving your enemies.
Oh, yeah.
We're exploring a chapter from Allan Kardec's The Gospel. According to the Spirit.
I do.
You sent this one our way.
It's a fascinating look at this age-old challenge through the lens of Spiritism.
Yeah,
A bit different than your usual philosophical
right.
or religious take on this.
Definitely. And honestly, when I first saw this topic, I thought, oh boy, this is going to be tough.
Right.
But Spiritism, with its connection to the spirit world, adds this whole other layer I never even considered.
Right.
Like, can our enemies exist in the spirit world too?
Yeah.
And if so, how does that change how we deal with them here?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Those are some of the big questions that Kardec tackles in this chapter. He's drawing on both Jesus' teachings and these amazing insights from the spirit world. And right off the bat, he makes this really important clarification
Okay.
about what loving your enemies actually means in practice.
Okay, good. Because my first thought was, wait, do I have to suddenly become best friends with everyone who's ever annoyed me?
Not quite. Both Jesus and the spirits that Kardec channeled emphasize that it's not about forcing yourself
Right.
to feel affection for someone who's wronged us.
Right.
In fact, Kardec even talks about how thoughts and feelings emit a kind of energy, almost like a physical law.
Okay. That actually makes so much more sense. It's like, you know how you can just feel the difference in the energy when you're around someone you love versus someone who, let's just say, rubs you the wrong way.
Yeah.
It's palpable.
Exactly. So it's not about denying those natural feelings. It's more about not letting them kind of rule your life. Instead, according to the spirits, loving your enemies means refusing to let hatred and a desire for revenge fester in our hearts.
Okay.
It's about forgiveness, genuinely wanting the best for them, and even being willing to help them if they're in need.
Okay. I can start to see how that's a lot different than just slapping on a fake smile and pretending everything's fine.
It definitely goes deeper than that. And here's where the spiritist perspective gets really interesting. It suggests that these relationships and the negativity that can come with them don't simply vanish when someone dies.
Wait, really? So even after death, we're still connected to our enemies in some way?
That's what the spirits communicating through Kardec seem to suggest. They really emphasize that clinging to vengeance actually fuels the enemy's anger in the afterlife, continuing that cycle of negativity even after their physical body is gone.
Wow. So it's like holding a grudge is giving a ghost permission to haunt you.
Right.
Not literally, of course.
Right.
But that feeling of unresolved negativity just hangs in the air between both of you.
That's a great way to put it. And the implications of that are huge. It means that forgiveness, or at least letting go of that burning desire for revenge, is not just for the other person's benefit, but for our own peace of mind as well.
It suddenly makes that whole forgive and forget thing
Right.
seem a lot less abstract
Yeah.
and a lot more practical. Like if I'm carrying around all this anger towards someone who's no longer physically here, it's not doing me any favors.
Right. It's about recognizing that those negative feelings can linger and impact both our own spirit and the other person's even after they've passed. We're all interconnected in ways we might not fully grasp.
You know what else really struck me in this chapter?
Yeah.
Kardec dives into this whole discussion about dueling,
Oh, yeah.
which at first glance seems a bit out of place. What's the connection there?
Yeah, it might seem random, but the spirits saw dueling as the ultimate example of pride and cowardice, completely contradicting Christ's teachings.
And what's wild is that St. Augustine, quoted in the text, argues that a duelist is actually more guilty than a common thief.
Wow.
His reasoning is that while a thief might be driven by desperation, dueling is all about premeditation, a calculated intent to kill, often over something as fleeting as a perceived insult to one's honor.
It's so interesting how, dueling is mostly a thing of the past, but those underlying motivations, pride, ego, the need to be right at all costs, those haven't disappeared. We still see them playing out in different ways today.
Totally. Like, how many arguments have we seen escalate into these massive online battles where people are throwing virtual punches driven by the same need to win and defend their pride?
Exactly. And so the question Kardec and the spirits he was in contact with seem to be posing is this. What are the modern-day duels we engage in? Where does our own pride and need for honor lead us to actions that might not be in line with this idea of loving our enemies?
It's definitely something to think about. But before we get too lost in existential despair, the good news is that the spirits offer us a powerful tool to combat these negative impulses.
Okay.
And that tool is
Charity.
charity.
Yeah.
And not just in the sense of donating money to a cause. The spirits define charity much more broadly, encompassing forgiveness, understanding, and acting with compassion, even toward those we perceive as our enemies.
Right. It's really about a change in attitude.
And they're not just being idealistic about this either.
Right.
The chapter highlights several very practical benefits of this approach.
Yeah.
For one, the spirits suggest that showing charity can actually disarm an enemy, taking away their justification for retaliating.
That's such an important point. If we meet anger with anger, it just escalates the situation.
Yeah.
But offering kindness, or at least refusing to stoop to their level, can interrupt that cycle of negativity.
It's like taking away their weapon, in a way.
Mhm.
They might be expecting a fight, and when they're met with compassion instead,
Yeah,
it throws them off balance.
precisely. And sometimes that disruption can be enough to plant a seed of change in them.
Yeah.
Even if it's not immediately apparent,
Uh-huh.
that act of kindness might make them question their own actions, or at least see the situation from a different perspective.
It's not about being weak or letting people walk all over us. It's about choosing a different kind of strength. It's the strength to rise above the negativity and respond with compassion, even when it's hard.
And what's remarkable is that the spirits suggest this can have a ripple effect, not just in our personal relationships, but on a larger scale as well. They point to the decline of dueling as evidence that humanity, as a whole, might be evolving towards a greater understanding of what it truly means to love our enemies.
So if we can collectively move past settling disputes with swords,
Yeah.
maybe there's hope for us yet.
Absolutely. And it all starts with each of us taking a look at our own lives, at the people who challenge us, and asking ourselves, how can I apply these principles of charity and understanding?
Right.
How can I choose a different path, even when it feels impossible?
Okay, but if spirits can evolve after death, does that mean our enemies in the spirit world could potentially change too?
Yeah, that's the really hopeful part. It's like even if we mess up in this life, even if we harm others or get stuck in negative patterns, it's not necessarily game over. There's still potential for growth and redemption even after we've left our physical bodies behind.
I love that idea. It's so much more encouraging than the whole eternal damnation thing you hear about
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a more compassionate view, and it ties back to that interconnectedness we were talking about.
Uh-huh.
If our thoughts and feelings can impact others even after death, imagine the possibilities if we start intentionally cultivating more positive energy. What if those good vibes could actually reach those who might still be stuck in a cycle of negativity?
Yeah. It's like sending good vibes into the universe,
Right.
except maybe a bit more targeted.
Right. And it could have implications for our relationships here on Earth, too. If we shift our focus from wanting to defeat our enemies to hoping for their growth and eventual understanding, it changes the whole dynamic.
Yeah. Instead of trying to win the argument,
Right.
it becomes more about helping them see a different perspective,
Yeah.
even if it takes a while.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe that shift in our thinking could even have an impact on the energy between us, softening those sharp edges and creating space for some level of reconciliation.
Okay, all of this is fascinating, but I have to admit, it's a bit hard to wrap my head around. Like, how do we actually do this? How do we go from feeling annoyed or hurt by someone to genuinely wishing them well, especially when they might still be actively doing things that bother us?
It's definitely not easy. And it's important to remember that the spirits weren't advocating for becoming doormats or allowing ourselves to be continually mistreated.
Yeah.
It's not about condoning harmful behavior.
So it's not about weakness.
Right.
It's about choosing a different kind of strength.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that responding with anger or seeking revenge often only escalates the situation, perpetuating that cycle of negativity.
It's exhausting. Holding on to all that resentment takes up so much energy.
Indeed. What the spirits are advocating for is a conscious choice to respond differently. This might look like setting clear boundaries, removing ourselves from toxic situations, or simply refusing to engage in the same level of negativity.
But it can also look like acts of kindness, right? Like, even if someone has treated us poorly, we can still choose to treat them with basic human decency.
Absolutely. This doesn't mean we have to become best friends or pretend that nothing happened, but we can choose not to add fuel to the fire. We can choose to act in a way that aligns with our own values, regardless of how the other person's behaving.
Yeah, it's about reclaiming our power, in a sense. We're not letting their actions dictate our own behavior.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe that unexpected act of kindness will plant a seed of change in them, even if it's not immediately apparent. It's about trusting that deep down, everyone has the capacity for growth and change.
Even if it's hidden under layers of ego and bad decisions.
Precisely. And remember, the spirits themselves are a testament to that idea. They're not perfect beings, but they're constantly striving to learn and evolve. They see their time in the spirit world as an opportunity to work through the baggage they brought with them from their earthly lives, to understand where they went wrong and how they can do better.
So it's like a giant cosmic do-over, in a way.
In a sense, yes. And if even spirits can change and find redemption, imagine the potential we have while we're still here in these physical bodies.
It's a pretty mind-blowing concept. Like,
Right.
if we shift our perspective from seeing our enemies as obstacles to seeing them as fellow travelers on this crazy journey of life,
Right.
maybe it opens up possibilities we never even considered.
And maybe, just maybe, it allows us to tap into a deeper level of compassion, not just for them, but for ourselves as well.
Yeah. Because let's face it, we all make mistakes. We all have moments where we're not our best selves. And maybe extending that grace to others makes it a little easier to extend it to ourselves as well.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together, stumbling along and trying to figure things out. And sometimes the people who challenge us the most are the ones who can teach us the most valuable lessons.
So instead of seeing our enemies as the bad guys in our life story, maybe we can start to see them as the characters who push us to grow and evolve.
What a great way to put it. And in that sense, maybe loving our enemies isn't about forcing ourselves to feel something we don't, but about choosing to see them through a more compassionate lens, recognizing their potential for change and understanding that their journey, just like ours, is still unfolding.
So it's less about achieving some perfect state of love and more about constantly striving to approach these relationships with more understanding and grace.
Exactly. It's an ongoing process, a journey of growth and discovery.
And in that journey, maybe we start to see that the lines between us and them, between friend and enemy, aren't quite as solid as we once thought.
Perhaps those lines are more like blurry boundaries, constantly shifting as we evolve and learn from each other.
That's a beautiful image. And it leads to a question that I think is at the heart of this whole concept. If even spirits can change, if even the most challenging relationships can become opportunities for growth, then what does that say about the power of forgiveness?
It's a powerful question, and one that Kardec himself grapples with throughout the text. He seems to suggest that true forgiveness goes beyond simply saying the words. It's about a genuine shift in our hearts, a willingness to let go of the past and see the other person and ourselves with fresh eyes.
Yeah, it's like hitting the reset button on the relationship, not necessarily forgetting what happened, but choosing to move forward without that baggage weighing us down.
Exactly. And the spirits suggest that this kind of forgiveness can be incredibly liberating. It frees us from the chains of anger and resentment, allowing us to step into a more peaceful and compassionate way of being.
So it's not just about being nice to our enemies. It's about doing something profound for ourselves as well.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that forgiveness, even when it feels impossible, is ultimately an act of self-love.
It's about choosing to free ourselves from the prison of our own negativity.
Exactly. And that freedom, that inner peace, is perhaps the greatest gift we can give ourselves.
And maybe, just maybe, as we start to experience that peace within ourselves, it ripples outward, touching those around us, and slowly, subtly, shifting the energy of the world around us. It feels like we've gone from this idea of love your enemies being some kind of impossible moral burden to something much more empowering, like a choice we can make, a journey we can embark on. That ultimately benefits not just others, but ourselves as well.
Yeah, that's the beauty of exploring these concepts through the Spiritist lens. It adds this layer of hope and possibility, reminding us that even the most challenging relationships, even those that extend beyond the physical realm, can become opportunities for growth and transformation.
And it all starts with shifting our perspective, right? Seeing our enemies not as adversaries to be defeated, but as fellow souls navigating their own complexities, just like we are.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that interconnectedness we were talking about, that invisible web of energy that ties us all together. And when we start approaching these relationships with more understanding and compassion, perhaps we start to shift the energy of that web, creating a ripple effect that extends far beyond our immediate circle.
So it's not just about changing our own hearts. It's about contributing to a larger shift in consciousness, a movement toward greater understanding and empathy in the world.
That's a powerful thought, isn't it? And it brings us back to Kardec's observation about the decline of dueling. If humanity can evolve past the need to settle disputes with violence, perhaps we are collectively moving toward a deeper understanding of what it means to love our enemies.
It's a hopeful sign, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think what really struck me in all of this is the idea that even spirits can evolve and change. It's like this reminder that no matter how stuck we might feel in our own negativity, no matter how much we might have messed up in the past, there's always potential for growth and redemption.
It's never too late to learn, to change, to become a better version of ourselves. And that applies to both the living and those who have passed on.
Which makes me wonder, if even spirits can find forgiveness and healing in the afterlife, what possibilities might open up for us here and now if we start taking those full steps toward understanding, compassion, and maybe even forgiveness?
That's a beautiful question to ponder, isn't it? And perhaps it's the most important takeaway from this entire deep dive. It's an invitation to look at our own lives, at the people who challenge us, and ask ourselves, how can we choose a different path? How can we tap into that wellspring of compassion that exists within each of us? And how can we, even in the face of adversity, become the change we wish to see in the world?
It's like to think about, but I think that's the point, right? To spark those questions, to challenge our assumptions, and to maybe, just maybe, inspire us to approach our relationships, even the difficult ones, with a little more heart and a little more hope.
And perhaps, as we do, we'll discover that the greatest enemy we've ever faced wasn't out there all along, but residing within our own hearts, that voice of judgment, anger, and fear, that keeps us from experiencing the true power of love.
So maybe loving our enemies starts with loving ourselves a little more, with extending that same grace and understanding inward as we do outward.
What a beautiful thought to end on. I think this deep dive has not only provided us with insights into the spiritist view of this complex concept, but also given us much to reflect on in our own lives.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive exploration of loving your enemies. May it inspire you to see the world and yourself with a little more compassion and a little more hope.